Okay, so today's talk is going to be of the series of these. We will have practical application of legacy. Why I call it legacy neural networks? Because these were the original before 2012. These were the neural networks which were applied in the most of the reservoir characterization industry, but they are quite uh, become very really applications were tested by now. The deep neural network is going to talk later, but it is going to be, it's not tested. So the today's talk will be just to mention that all these talks as we today will be application of neural networks, then follow with the comparison of inversions next week, and the week after the automation and the quantitative sequence stratigraphy. That's what we are doing in house development. And then deep learning applications in geoscience and the rock physics and pre-stack modeling. And then we'll end up these series with the complete simultaneous inversion workflow, followed by neural network, but it's part of the simultaneous how you do inversions. So today's talk will be Petro-Explorer services, then history of the neural networks, unsupervised neural networks, and supervised neural networks. So there are both ways what is the difference between them and how they apply to the oil and gas industry, and mainly the seismic reservoir characterization. And then we conclude with the sum of the talk. So the services which we provide contains all the, those who have attended talks before, is the quantitative side, which we do AVO, LMR, azimuthal AVO, and any of the pre-stack related inversions, post-stack related inversions, and including deterministic, colored, stochastic, and the hit cube various inversion, and then neural network based analysis based on outputs from all these attributes, and the well log analysis or interpretation like sequence stratigraphy, spectral decomposition, Wheeler diagrams, RGT cube. They all come combined together in a more using the neural network. So neural networks is our key, been there for 20 years in my background, as well as this company's background about 11 years. So we have this combined into the neural network analysis. So it's been key to many interpretation workflows. So just about the company, we operate in we have done projects over the, of course, Western Canada, US, and going to Colombia, Argentina, Mexico. So that's been our main area. And on the east with the rift basins like Tanzania, Kenya, more chimney analysis. We'll show examples today. Oman, more reservoir characterization, sequence stratigraphy. Back in India and Pakistan, more development related or the small fields, as well as in Pakistan, sequence stratigraphy work and inversion work. So that has been, and in Chad and Nigeria, been more petrophysics, as well as some of the inversion work as well. So worldwide, we have more application. There's one project in Europe as well, which was related to the well data analysis. So that goes to our toolbox. So we've been, of course, we've been representing OpenDetect for last 12 years. And that has been in Canada. Really, our key base is the OpenDetect with all the variations or all the plugins which we test, use, promote, as well as we add that to our Hampson Russell for mostly for the pre-stack work, inversion, AVO. And then we develop our own this called QStrat software, which is the well-based sequence stratigraphy, which is automation of quantitative sequence stratigraphy. We will have a talk about that later in the series. The one thing you can, most of the workflows within OpenDetect, you can go with what called the geoscience package. And geoscience package, it can be rented out on a daily basis. Like most of the time you use the free area to prepare your data and those things. And then if you want to, certain applications you want to use, you can have a for a week and run through many of the attributes. So on the demo data sets, it's all plugins are open, which means you take a demo data set and you can run and test and you train yourself with the all plugins, all DGB plugins, and then have that open up when you need your commercial data, commercial use. Although you can use it commercially, the open source part. So the so first, let's talk about what is neural network. Of course, it's trying to mimic the uh, human brain functioning, or actually more cognitive functioning of the humans, how they reserve information, how they remove information from these, so they don't take all the information in memory. Computers used to do all the information kept in memory rather than analyzing them in a non-mathematical way. It's not non-mathematical, but it is that the main uh, thing which humans brain would do is to take the important information relation to the what it's trying to do. So it's trying to recognize a face, you would probably see few of the important information and relate it to the what you have seen before. So there is like a robust, it have to be robust, flexible. So the information can be inconsistent, contaminated. You can be in light or dark. You can still recognize by voice, by the walking way of walking. So how it is like recognize humans is similar what it would do in a uh, uh, computer is trying to mimic. And the unforeseen situations are how the other domains can be applied to unforeseen situations. So it can go in its own way, but that is where the controls come in, like when to stop it, otherwise it will continue training itself to a wrong areas. So, and also the most important, it is highly parallel, which means there are uh, multiple CPUs can be used at the same time, and that's what made it really powerful and usable. So, but it have a long history. So it was started by McCullough and Pitts in 1943 as a first thing start learning, but they could not really do much till till 80s, because all the algorithms were linear algorithms and could be processed in a linear way. So with computers coming in with non-linear optimization algorithm by Rumelhart in 1986 is the really when it started picking up with a non-linear understanding and weighting and those factors, which we'll explain later. So late in 90s saw a huge push in application of neural networks, and that's when most of the geoscience applications also started, like emerge, and Vanguard had inversion with neural network, and then chimney analysis and various in late 90s presented, which I will cover. And what called in also in 97, the long short-term memory uh, also started, which is now becoming a base of the deep neural network. So there's a lot of neural network development, but in 2000s, people got away from it, and because they wanted to, with the power, they wanted to use mathematical equations back into the and so stochastic became more popular in 2000s than neural network. So it was a struggle between neural network and stochastic, and now deep neural network is coming in and overcoming, and we've been struggling between or hybrid now what we call the probability, which is a hybrid between stochastic and neural networks to come up with the probability functions. So those are few history. So the machine learning, so it's kind of A lot of applications which came after we gave progress to this is the web search engines, object recognition, self-driving cars, and language translation. And now it's a lot of tools are available in that area. But how it got uh, not many got applied to the oil and gas industry because it was not big research institutions were kind of from mobile or from big companies were taken down. So there is not that much. But now with open source, it is coming back into the a lot of Python, and those with the Python development, it's coming back in the full application. So in reservoir characterization, we had a deGroot, and we have Schultz, we have Doviton, well log analysis. So it was applied to well log analysis with the geolog had this fuzzy logic and various other neural network applications to do multi-min analysis. And so, but we also have the seismic attributes and combining the attributes into the real features. So if we combine by neural network, we could come up with the answer. So it's a solution-based analysis or just classifying a data. So there are two major divisions, either classifying or the solution-based is like if you have a porosity from the logs and you have an inversion, can you convert into porosity and those? So can you improve the frequencies by using that? So it is the detect features or classify the data into segments. So we will cover first is the unsupervised neural networks, and then we'll go into the supervised neural networks. So unsupervised neural networks, mainly how it's applied to open detect is UVQ, Stratomagic have Conan SOM. What it is do is that what are vector quantizers is that you actually find the hidden layer, you get the weights from the input layer and through your training data set, and in order to come up with the output layer. So every output, like you have a 500 points of the one type and 500 of the other type or various things. You say, okay, this is yes and no. And then you relate that each of the attribute at every sample, how it relates to that yes and no. So then it tries to classify that how good is the classification, how are the weights applied to each of these actors, should I put in one or the other? Or should I just ignore some of the inputs or get rid of some of the inputs? So there are various called the vector analysis. Or it it was by Cohen had Cohen have self-organizing maps, which is the same as to taking the cluster of the data and how you classify it. But it is more than two-dimensional. So it's a multi-dimension cluster. We could easily do in a PDF with two-dimension or three-dimension, but it is becomes really difficult when it coming about 20 different dimensions when each sample have a relationship to the many other samples. So that is what the unsupervised learning and how it is applied is the most important application which have been very successful for the geologist is waveform facies analysis. So waveform facies is basically taking your interpretation and taking a certain geologically consistent interval over the, like usually you tie it up to a flooding surface and have a certain waveform, and you would be able to classify that waveform or generalize a waveform which is representative of certain classes, and then divide that your whole data set into certain classes. So like if you have the seismic, and if you're looking for classification of this area from top to bottom, you have a various waveform. So these waveforms will go as a synapses and then go as the output traces will keep on changing till it get a best classification of the waveform. So every incoming trace is going to assign either new class or be part of the class. So they have what, like a 10 number of boxes you can give, and then it will try to classify within those boxes. So each of the sample have like a 20 samples per waveform. So that 20 samples by 20 by 20, this is the relationship from top to bottom. So which mean it would contain the amplitude, phase, and frequency information within this waveform or interval based. So that interval could lead to very geological information. So this was presented in 2003 from Indonesia by Kolo, that this channel you could see now just normal facies analysis would bring up these, but there are equivalent trace types here versus what is in the channel. So it is, although it is different, and because it is marked, it looks much better. But then when they did a principal component analysis, further divide that into the three principal components. So that is another method to apply. Many of the neural networks do apply principal component. So you come up with a separation even from there back into the channel. Now it's a different colors, but you can see that channel actually have a displacement of these uh, structural displacement by default is actually clearly saying that this channel is being cut and then starts again. So this channel was from before, and this fault system. So even you can tell how much is the lateral throw of the fault. So it is very important to use geological information to find how much is the cut. Even here you have a cut between the fault displacement. So this was one. There was another. Pupon in 2004. And these are again coming back from the CGG flagship geo work, which was the Pupon was one part of that work back in 1998, 1997, 98. And then Paradigm took over and went on with Stratomagic. So there were applications of these by then defining the system, like you can almost separate out the beach and the lagoon and various alluvial plain versus the coastal plain and embayment right from the analysis of the facies analysis. And then this is volumetric facies work, which could separate out the areas of high sand and high shale in those areas. It's still applicable depending on how closely you understand. It helps you understand the geology, and then you can control that your interpretation is correct or not. So it's like kind of goes both way. The This is some of the work which we did before. Is uh, one on the Shonda and the carbonate platform. There is a high carbonate high, which could be separated. If you pick a top, usually the thickness of these carbonate bank is not very clear around, but there is a porosity lago around the green one, and there is this white, because that colored as white at the porosity area because of the erosion of the edges. And but it's very subtle. Like those areas of changes are very subtle. But by using the analysis, you can see the change from the carbonate bank going to the shoulder or to the basin area, which is the other. So it classification allow you to see a geology or geological problem differently than when you try to map the peak and trough or ratios and those things. So that example like goes into the another example on Nautican sand in the west central Alberta, that you can clearly start looking at the meandering system within Nautican, like going another channel coming here. And when you go through, you can see that there are possibly sand accumulation would be based on the meandering understanding of the geology. So you would start interpreting geology more like a geologist looking at the derivatives rather than seismic amplitude mapping, which would may or may not reveal all the details of a system, because the off and on, the main problem with Nauticon here is there is a coal marker on the top which affects a lot of amplitudes, but the phase and these are changes. You can see the phase has been this line across. You can see the change where you could not pick that horizon is that area which is related to the meandering part. So the very clear started understanding, and then how the channels are mixing and coastal plains and even the levee plains around these would tell you the plain environment. The uh, this study we did back in 2010, presented at your convention, is that normally with the well data only, you could not differentiate what is going on throughout this cardium, one of the cardium thickness sand. But once you apply the facies analysis, you could see that these three wells were actually drilled into this shore face channel. While you can follow those three, I know they've tried to follow those three, but they end up in a non-sand facies. They could have gone down straight. So the actually line of better sand thickness as it changes to lagoon thickness. Now the thickness don't necessarily exactly, but with the colors you can see that there is how much correlation exists with the real features what cardium system is doing. There is a channel coming in here which actually going into lagoon, and you don't see that part in here. You see our called offshore facies, as well as you see the lagoonal facies with the thickness increasing and the coastal berms. So it's a lot more detail than what was happening. So narrow shore face analysis. So we had a full study on this one. And in Colombia, we had Carbonera formation have been vary to define some of the lithic channel systems because of high impedance. You see the peak related to the lithic channel system versus the other small channels coming in and going into the very low impedance channels, which might be sandy against the lithic. So there are stratigraphic possibility along with the structural mapping. There's a few of the work in Colombia, no, in South Africa, no, not South Africa, Africa, in the Kenya Anza Basin. So there's a lot of information you can say based on any of the feature how they sand and shales or the trapping system developed. We will address that in the unsupervised neural network as well later. And so the individually fault blocks, how they have a sand and shale facies as becoming shaly from the sandy. So the deposition is this direction, and you have the sand and where the high this area, which means there is a sand and shale overlap. It means couple of reservoir and trapping. And so different intervals have a different variation throughout. Lesser sand, more problem areas or more shaly areas. So it's a combination of from a flooding surface, how you can see as an interval rather than as a single peak or trough or amplitudes, which are very much defined by amplitude, not taking into account the polarity and changes which happen due to AVO effect and due to other geological features effect. So in unsupervised, you can also run a sectoring of taking a data set and trying to subdivide mass transport system like this one, and or extracting out a channel system, seeing geobodies with sands and shales. Depending on So if you can see it on few of the attributes, you can use those attributes to then combine and come up with the neural network based analysis, because you're already seeing it, a portion of the things on each attribute. So you can combine them to come up with an unsupervised volume of the facies, or and then you can combine it with the geological facies from the well data. So the other is the supervised neural network, which is the other major application. In the supervised system, what you are trying to do is to giving you an input layer and an output layer and the hidden layer. It's the same way, but in this case, you are defining defining that which one are my yes and no. Example pairs. So you have to define it pairs, or even you can define 3 classes or 4 classes, but you're defining, supervising the classes. You're not telling it to take the data and segment it. You are defining it to be the classes which you handpick. Like, so you want to extract a body which you think you can visibly see, but not in all of the 3D. And then you pick in certain area, say, okay, this is what I'm looking for, but this is not what I'm looking for. So you have to define what I'm looking for and define what I'm not looking for. And then let computer characterize, go through neural network to take that information using multiple input of the data and then output you, okay, this is what I think what you're looking for. So, but it would be a probability of what you're looking for rather than a single saying yes or no. So that is what the probability is very important, because then you can narrow down high probable versus low probability areas. So that is what we various applications of it defined. One would be the inversion. After you run the inversion, you can actually take the well-logged data, uh, may or may not be used in the inversion, or it could be more well data than what is used as a background in the inversion, in the deterministic inversion, and then you can go next step into neural network modification of that inversion. That's what usually in our workflow, that you increase the frequency of the inversion, or you can take any attributes like porosity, or I usually work with lithology or porosity are the two very important, because so water saturation is difficult to actually do a neural network inversion, because of unless you are already defined the full and then come up with the water saturation one. Those are all the areas you can actually take any attribute which is related to the inversion, uh, and then create the lithology logs, or the porosity logs or phi-H logs. So the various logs can be then generated based on the prediction. So it's much better prediction. The same as what we call the porosity prediction used in emerge, like using well data as the target. The neural network has proven to deliver better answers than the inversion and or the regression. Doing the stochastic or regression based on stochastic attributes uh, might not give that, but the neural network has shown to be give you a more broad spectrum of what the probabilities of the findings. So then you can take that probability and invert them in, or convert them into the uh, uh, that how, because you have the uncertainty as a part of the neural network inversion based on log prediction. So there is a like a blind test well would have the porosity, and this is what porosity is trying to come up based on the band limited seismic inversion. The same the prediction, much better prediction using, actually if you can predict not only log to log relationship, but also the using the inversion based. So come up with the porosity or shear wave logs, or those based on inversion plus based on log prediction. So you can combine them together as a application for there's also again a merge application. The uh, So multilinear perceptron is also can be used, and many studies have shown them. This is from South Africa, have shown them the porosity or the successful prediction of the porosity. So lithology and porosity are the most prominent ones, and then water saturation, of course, would tie up with the AVO, and then with these. Multiple, if taking AVO attributes, you can also minimize based on the AVO attributes. It's like reducing your inputs and or showing computer a lot of relationships, and then it comes up with a single prediction based on all the ideas which you have been given. So that is what we bases. Again, the most prominent application which we have dealt with is the chimney analysis. One of the very prominent in the rift systems. Any of the passive margins and rift system is that you can Gulf of Mexico, it could be Middle East, it could be east coast of uh, it's Colombia, many of the Argentina basins. So there is a worldwide a lot of basins which have this chimney been shown to have chimney analysis. Started originally by Statoil with along with OpenDetect working together. Now they have a complete chimney atlas, and they have a complete memoir published of migration and those. So the idea is taking various attributes and come up with a single attribute based on supervising what you're looking for to come up with the salt or the chimney. So, but your input attributes, the user usually chooses them based on what is functioning where you can see visually the best. So that's the choice of the user. The other is supervised neural network. So the workflow is like you're taking the seismic data, picking the examples, defining the attribute set, and training the network. So all the network training usually goes, it all depends on your training, how you can train the network, then you apply to the same seismic data over an interval or over the volume, and that output with the probability or class plus match. So these multi-layer perceptrons are the layers of these. Again, the deep learning is just the extension of these multi-layers, which would keep on going of the more layers to be added in between. So the relationship is developed in, and the only weights are changed. So it is any layer based on the training, the weights are changed on each layer, and then as we go through, you have more. Uh, that layers are then hidden layer. So you hide kind of 20% of the data and use 80% of your training set, and then 20% will be used as a blind to test against. So the neural network get fully trained properly, and you have to stop training at certain point. Like this is an example of the chimney data. Like you can see uh, uh, the Hamaki signature going up, possibly the chimney normal data not filtered would have these look like a noise signature going up. That would be picked as a chimney. It is one of the known chimney example. So you have these, you pick like green as a representative that yes, chimney, there is a chimney, yes, and outside, yes, there is no chimney. Although the signature on the eye, it look very similar here, but you know that there is not much chimney, so you pick the weaker zones, especially which would be related to this, so it can find the attribute. Now, from there, energy, local tip, all these attributes are extracted. And also for chimney, there is one more thing that you have for every point, it looks for 100 millisecond above and below. which mean the attribute how what is happening vertically, because you might have a dim spot which could be noise, but is it have a vertical effect? And that vertical effect is very important for the chimney, that it is because it's a vertical analysis. So that would be, as you feed that into the neural networks and train that neural network, you can output then the probability. So this is the, again, probability with the highest, red is the highest probability. It's showing on the same line, but it would then be extended over the whole 3D. So you would have a chimney uh, coming this with it. We have done work on some of the world's largest gas field from the South Pars or North Field from Qatar and South Pars, and you can see the chimney coming in from the bottom, the migration, and then going to that 1600 TCF gas field fed by these chimney analysis and with a full carbonate canopy on the top. And we did work with that data to see those effects. So it is much proven now over many years, like especially when it started back in 99 to by now it's like 12, 13 years. No, 21, 21, 22 years. So that's been quite been successful in many areas, especially Gulf of Mexico has been very common, because you kind of develop the whole petroleum system by looking at the migration, possibly where the source rocks are and how these chimneys are in relation to various effects. But you also minimize the risk of taking your seismic discontinuities like artifacts and those, and trying to make sure that they are not artifacts what you're looking at. So deep reservoir is here, chimney showing from deep reservoir, spill point leakage, and coming up with the shallow reservoir with the paleo mud volcanoes, which we can detect on the geomorphology, or the leakage near the surface, and then you can ocean bottom related pock marks and seepage expressions coming up to the near surface or the ocean bottom related. So the all things kind of tie together to make a pock mark like here, and you have the initial pockmark on these surfaces. So the whole system can be then analyzed and put the story of migration together. So contain all elements of the petroleum system. It would connect. The other very important things what they found, and that was initially in Statoil back when it was Statoil, now it's Equinor. The top oil reservoir also have the gas clouds. So these are more like cloud rather than, there is a spill point leakage here and a spill point leakage here, but mainly it comes up as a cloud. And then you have various pock marks related to the full system coming to the ocean bottom. So, or not, yeah, seabed, on the seabed, you get see the pock marks. So the relationship is there, while that is the spill point leakage. So you can actually tell based on the migration and the morphology how the reservoir, so it could de-risk the reservoir based on how the cloud is happen. So the oil reservoir usually have a slow leakage through the system, and it changes the rock physics, or changes the rocks to reflect, or I would say it would be changed into a very mini capillary based AVO effect, which would create a not really AVO effect, but noise effect. So it would be difficult to image because dispersion is too much through these chimney area. The very with Anadarko and those the examples which we have worked with before is the full analysis of the Gulf of Mexico. Some of the chimneys, you can actually see the very prominent chimneys, and then you can see the leakages on the fault interval, which mean it would reduce the or increase the risk of finding the reservoir there. while some of the ceiling fault will not have the chimney associated, which will be cleaner faults versus the chimney associated to the faults. So what you see is a lot of leaking faults versus ceiling faults could be differentiated, and it could reduce a huge especially in the deep offshore, it a lot of reducing that risk in the offshore drilling, which is a lot of millions of dollars from a commercial discovery to just oil shows or gas shows. Moreover, various studies also have shown how it can be mapped the fault surfaces, and you would have leakages along the fault surfaces. This is another study which came out is that faults do not leak throughout as a equally leak at places. They have a different leakage points or low stress points where they can leak, and then that is the different area. Sometime a leaking would be going through various stages of expulsion. So that expulsion usually showed up in as the pockmarks or have the different chimney. So looking at the chimney, a mapped fault surface, you could see the various effects, more chimney analysis, and then going through more probability of leakage at various points in the fault system. So which may be related to the subsurface structure as well as the effect, but it is the shape, the concave shape, and the Parkmark distribution. Work what we did in uh, East Coast is over the Western Newfoundland. We could see clearly a chimney effect going through the various carbonate Devonian on the top or division and coming down to the carbonate platform, which we're analyzing. It would reduce the increase the risk of having the leakage, while it could have the cloud effect. And these are again, this is thrust based, so there is a lot of noise related to the poor data, but also the poor data also have the various effects. And so the closures can be taken into with along with the de-risking the area. And so another last, I will just cover the case study. What we did in a lot of work on 2D and 3D data in South Tanza Basin, Kenya. So for a exploration through a completely exploratory basin or very less drilled. So there were only 2 or 3 wells drilled in the whole basin. There was a one well here, one here, one here. And we could differentiate that the Anza well actually did hit a area where there's a lot of chimneys. These are again 2D lines showing, so there is a lot of chimneys, and it was a volcano, associated volcanic eruptions and related to, so there is a big movement and leakage. While here on the western side, there were less movement and leakage. While within where Andela was drilled is complete not, it was not deep enough, and it didn't encounter much of the sand. So it's much of the shales, which mean mostly it's a sandy, like silty and sandy feature with no trapping. So there are whole system need to be understood, that the center is a mud plains and siltstones, while the cap rock is really important. And if you see the eastern side, you have whole of the leakage throughout, showing the chimney through right up to the surface. While here you have a less chimney effect. So less chimney effect could just mean that there is no migration, or it could mean that it is trapping or coming with the possible traps and going. If you select the whole migration system, you can see that the kitchen or the source rock would be down here in the rift system, and then you have the both sides, more vertical leakage, expulsion of the hydrocarbon would affect. And it has been proven further north in the same basin, and the Malut and Muglat basin have shown to be a trapping system. Although this would be a possible leakage zone, but further up dip would be trapping of these analysis. So when we look at it in a 3D, this is now from a 3D, we can see the main feeding fault system, which would feed these traps, which would have a fault related trap. So each of the fault bench would have been fed by these migration, which is coming from the base level migration. So fully migration system, you can analyze it by coming from bottom to the top. So right now you're seeing these to the northeast side, more toward the kitchen. And as you go through, there is a lot of migration possibility with the chimney moving further throughout these fault systems. And as you come up and up to 1600, and then more now these faults much less along these faults compared to the one further south of the fault system, which mean that this is again combining it with the trapping, which would be the facies analysis, which I showed the maps, some of them before, is that when the sand and shale packages will come, then you would have a trapping and you would have a seal opportunity, because the shale is really in a rift system, it's more looking for the passive shale input, and that is what to finding the sand shale uh, uh, pairs, which would improve the decrease the risk of drilling certain areas. So we define based on these chimney combined with sequence stratigraphy, combined with the facies analysis, you can build a complete system. So since 90s, neural networks has been successfully applied in reservoir characterization. Many industry software, including OpenDetect and Hampson Rosso and various others, have used the extensive application of neural networks. So OpenDetect have extended capabilities now with the deep learning plugin, which within 3 weeks from now, like in April 22, we'll go over all the deep learning plugins. And so looking back at the last 20 years, you have so the clients have much broader perspective of how good and bad and how you can combine it with other quantitative and stochastic methods to improve the results, or improve the what comes as a exploration targets, as well as the development targets, because we've been using more recently in the development scenario, where you say, okay, well, these are leaking or fault leaking versus fault seal, how we can determine that much better through neural networks. And so deep learning talk we will have related to covering the more recent development of all these machines, which are getting operations of the uh, gigabyte of or billions of operations in the how things are progressing with much faster neural networks. The accuracy is getting much better accuracy with some of the new neural networks with multiple hidden layers. So the time is to apply these now more and more, and we are part of it, applying that to the applications which we have seen before. And OpenDetect is already released all of the bunch of the deep learning as a plugin, and I will cover that, as well as there is a OpenDetect YouTube where you can see a series of talks from Paul de Groot, and I can send that information as well. So thanks for zooming in, and we'll open up if anybody have questions related to this topic.